From the Schmoes Know Network Studios in Los Angeles, California, it's time for Profiles with your hosts, Alicia Malone and Scott Mantz.
Hello, Schmoville! Welcome to episode 11 of Profiles.
Woo!
And boy, have we got an offer you can't refuse. Our spotlight today is Francis Ford Coppola. What a life, what a career, what great movies.
What a great winemaker.
Yes. Among other things, right?
Among other things. He, of course, is one of the most influential filmmakers in the world. He shaped American cinema, part of the new Hollywood wave that happened in the late 60s, early 70s, towards the almost to the 80s. And he always bended the rules, pushed the boundaries creatively and with use of technology. So interesting. His stories and his movies, I find, are often about families. Of course, there's the obvious family, the Godfather family. But then there's also the family that you're not born into. One that happens by circumstance, like in war, like Apocalypse Now,
right.
Or a family that's bred from social classes, like The Outsiders.
Absolutely.
So much to talk about with Francis Ford Coppola.
What a great observation that is, Alicia Malone.
Well, thank you.
I love it. But yes, he was born into this new Hollywood revolution that included Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, his protege, young guy named George Lucas, but also Hal Ashby and Robert Altman. And looking at his work in the 70s, 4 back-to-back brilliant masterpieces. So it's no surprise that Francis Ford Coppola is the only filmmaker to ever win the top prize, the Palme d'Or, the Cannes Film Festival, twice in the same decade.
Wow.
The rules of Francis Ford Coppola, he says, write and direct from original screenplays. Use the most modern technology available, and something he's done time and time again, self-finance them.
Yeah, well, he created the independent studio American
Zoetrope, yep.
with George Lucas, one of the members. He also promoted a lot of other great filmmakers like Kurosawa, Wim Wenders, Paul Schrader, and then he started the careers, or helped the careers, of people like Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Harrison Ford, Marlon Brando.
When you watch the conversation, and there's that
Gene
scene in the
Hackman.
Conversation, you've got Gene Hackman, Harrison Ford, and Robert Duvall in the same scene.
Yeah, Robert
and you're
Duvall.
like, what? Oh my God.
Insane. Well, what a life. What a
wonderful
wonderful
life.
And we'll take a look at that in our video called It's a Wonderful Life. Take it away.
Francis Ford Coppola was born on April 7, 1939 in Detroit, Michigan. His mother, Italia, was an actress, and his father, Carmine, was a musician who would go on to compose the iconic scores for many of Coppola's very best movies. After graduating from Hofstra University with a drama degree, which was followed by graduate work at UCLA's film school, Coppola honed his skills as an assistant to B-movie king Roger Corman, with whom he made his feature directorial debut in 1963 with Dementia 13. In 1969, Coppola formed the San Francisco-based independent production company American Zoetrope with young protege George Lucas, and the following year, Coppola co-wrote the Oscar-winning screenplay for Patton. But then came an offer Coppola couldn't refuse, the chance to direct The Godfather, based on the runaway bestseller written by Mario Puzo. It was an instant hit, winning Best Picture at the Academy Awards and kicking off an unprecedented decade during which Coppola also directed the classic films The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now. In all, Francis Ford Coppola has been nominated for 14 Academy Awards as a writer, producer, or director, winning 5 times. The Academy also bestowed him with the Irving G. Thalberg Award, honoring his outstanding career in film.
What a great score.
Love it.
On The Godfather.
You had to use that, right?
I had to. Come on.
Well, what was your first blood with Francis Ford Coppola? The first Coppola movie you ever saw?
The first Coppola movie I saw was The Godfather.
Okay.
Now, I didn't see it till after school. It was when I was working at Video Easy, the video store
Of
in
course.
Sydney, Australia. But I knew so much about this movie because it's so iconic. And there were so many pop culture references to the film throughout everything, even The Simpsons, or you just always would hear the, make him an offer, can't refuse,
Yeah.
and the cotton ball cheeks. And so when I sat down to watch it, I wasn't expecting it to be as interesting as it was. You know, just because I thought the gangster movie genre, that is more of a guy's thing. It's something that I didn't think I would be interested in. But man, I was wrong, and I'm so glad that I was wrong, because that story is so fascinating and those characters are so brilliantly written. It sucked me in, and then I've been a Coppola fan ever since. And then I went on to watch Apocalypse Now and The Conversation and everything we'll be talking about today.
But isn't it funny how when you watch how it's spoofed and imitated over the years, and then you go back and watch the original film, you go, now I get it.
Now I totally get it. And there's a good reason why it's spoofed so much, is because it's just so brilliant.
Oh, it's such a brilliant movie.
What was your first blood?
My first blood was Apocalypse Now.
Nice.
Which I saw in 1980 on television.
How old were you?
I was 12.
Oh my gosh.
And again, my parents...
They have good taste in filmmakers.
They have good taste in filmmakers, but bad timing when it comes to showing an 11 or 12-year-old some of these movies. I mean, they showed me The Shining in 1980.
Wow.
But I remember watching it at home. It was a Sunday night, and during the commercial breaks, they would come back from the commercial breaks and say, parental discretion is advised.
Yeah.
And the image that stuck out in my head for many years until I was able to go back and watch it the way it should be seen, complete and on the big screen, was that image of Lance, Sam Bottoms.
Lance!
You know,
Come on,
water
Lance.
skiing with the sound of the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction, and the look on Martin Sheen's face like, what have I gotten myself into?
What is going on here?
But there's also the scene, I'll just never forget, Ride of the Valkyries, the helicopter attack on the Vietnamese village. You know, that... Whenever I hear Wagner to this day, I think of Apocalypse Now.
And I remember watching Jarhead with Jake Gyllenhaal, and they were watching Apocalypse Now in the movie, because you just hear the Ride of the Valkyries and you know straight away it's Apocalypse Now.
Well, if I can bring the Beatles into a show, you should be able to bring Jake Gyllenhaal into a show, your future husband.
He's my favorite. Okay, let's get into our Fast Five. At number
five.
Steady gold. Pony boy.
Stay Gold. The Outsiders.
The Outsiders came out March 25th, 1983, based on a book by S.E. Hinton, and nominated for 3 awards, not Oscars. They are the Young Artist Awards, and it actually won one for Young C. Thomas Howell.
Well, what an incredible cast.
What a cast.
I mean, most of these guys hadn't done a movie before, or they were very, very new to it. But you got Emilio Estevez, you've got Rob Lowe, you've got Patrick Swayze, Matt Dillon, Diane Lane, and Tom Cruise. It's
Tom
amazing.
Cruise, when you watch the ending credits, Tom Cruise's name is the 7th one down. That never happened again.
No way. I mean, it just shows that Coppola had such a great eye for casting. I remember he said that he thought about Emilio because Emilio used to hang around with his father, Martin Sheen, on the set of Apocalypse Now. But this is it's a really interesting movie, isn't it? It's very nostalgic, 50s film, all about teen angst and social classes and rebellion. Just the beauty of the sunsets and the scenery. It's so lush, and it's quite poetic, isn't it?
It's a really lush film. It's poetically shot, like you pointed out, with the sunset. And it is a movie for mostly women, I think.
Yeah, because the guys are very sensitive.
Yes.
The Greasers versus the Socs.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got, listen, this is Coppola's version. You could say it's his take on West Side Story, but without the music and the singing and the dancing.
Or a bit like Rebel Without a Cause.
Rebel Without a Cause,
as well.
definitely.
It's quite over the top, very romanticized, written by, as you said, S.E. Hinton, between the ages of 15 and 17.
Right.
So I think that explains a lot of the themes, that kind of alien feeling towards the guys in the movie. But they are written very well. The characters, it's hard to keep track of them all at the start when you're watching the film, but then you soon get into it.
It's interesting that Coppola shot this and Rumblefish back to back.
Yeah.
Both movies are based on books by S.E. Hinton. But while you were watching The Outsiders again, because you and I always like to go back and rewatch these movies, especially if we haven't seen them in a while, and I hadn't seen The Outsiders in decades. But I'm watching the film going, this is such a deep, sensitive, moving film. is this really from the same guy who did The Godfather Part 2 and Apocalypse Now?
I know, but
couldn't believe it.
it still has that same mythic quality to it that he
Yes.
does so well. And I like that he paid as much attention to the cinematography for this movie as he did with his other ones.
Oh, it's just a beautiful, beautiful movie. And our profilers in Schmoville agree. Ben Friedman says, in 8th grade, we read the book and my teacher showed the movie to the class. I remembered the opening credits were shown and I saw Coppola's name and I said, oh my God, he directed The Godfather. I love that guy. For about 2 minutes, the rest of my class just stared at me thinking I was nuts, but I didn't care because I was happy to see his name. After watching the movie, I respected Coppola even more because he perfected the difficult task of adapting a book to the screen with 100% faithfulness to the source material.
Well, he was convinced to make the movie after a high school teacher and her students wrote to Coppola and said that he should make this book into a film. Jordan Huffman is also a fan of The Outsiders. He says, I first saw it in middle school when my drama class performed it, and I thought it was such a good story. The cinematography and the pacing are both top-notch. The characters are expertly portrayed by a slew of future Hollywood heavyweights, and there are great scenes such as Ponyboy and Cherry talking about the sunset that are unforgivable. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah, and actually that's the scene that stuck out when I was rewatching it. I just
the silhouettes.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was
Just
gorgeous.
Stay
It was
gold. Stay gold,
Stay gold,
Mantz.
Ponyboy. Stay gold, Alicia Malone.
Stay gold.
Well, what is your right stuff when it comes to Coppola? Your favorite scene in one of his movies?
My right stuff is from The Godfather Part 1.
Okay.
At the very end. And this is when Michael, he's becoming the Don. You see him, but this is the moment when he becomes the Godfather.
Right.
And that is after the baptism, after he's killed the heads of the 5 families, after he's killed Carlo, and then Connie comes in, she's hysterical, he sends her away. Kay comes in, asks him about his business, which is...
Don't ask me about my business, Kay.
Exactly. And then he's like, okay, just this once. Then he lies straight to her. She believes him. She leaves the room and then she sees the guys coming towards him, kissing his hand, Godfather, and just a look on her face when she knows and the door shuts that he has really become this guy.
And that actually, now that I think about it, now that you mentioned that moment, that was the moment where, yes, he became the Godfather, but that's also the moment when he became very, very different from Vito.
Yeah.
Vito never would have lied.
Exactly.
Vito was a class act as far as gangsters go.
Yeah.
And he was someone you respected and admired and wanted to please, whereas Michael was a Godfather you just feared.
And someone that was completely different from the Michael at the start.
That's true.
Completely different.
What a transformation. We'll get to all that.
We'll get to all that.
We'll get to all that,
what's your
Schmoville.
right
Yes,
stuff?
we will. My right stuff, Apocalypse Now. And there are so many scenes from Apocalypse Now that I could choose. Obviously, the Ride of the Valkyrie scene.
Yep.
The Playboy Playmate scene. Not
Dennis
because...
Hopper.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper. I'm an American! Boy, those monkeys do bite! He is crazy in this
so
movie.
crazy.
But the scene that I love, the scene that always really gets under my skin more than anything, is, as you know, where you're watching the movie, you're in Willard's head as he's learning about Kurtz. And as he goes from being on this mission to kill him, he grows to admire him. He just wants to meet the guy.
Yeah.
So when that finally happens, after he's literally dragged through the mud by all the other savages, and he's dragged into Kurtz's lair, which is very dark, you hear Kurtz before you see him. And Marlon Brando, that was the second time that happened, because remember in the first Godfather,
Yeah, that's right. You
Right.
don't see him for a few minutes,
for a
but
few
you hear
minutes,
his voice.
but you hear his voice. And it's a great effect. But what happened with Apocalypse Now was Brando showed up to the set very overweight,
Yeah.
and Coppola pulled a very brilliant artistic move of shooting him in the shadows, which added to the menace and the intensity of the film, so that when he's talking to Willard, his face sort of comes in and out of the shadow,
Yeah.
and it's really, really haunting. It's
It
really
really,
haunting.
really is. So many details in Coppola's movies.
Details.
Segue to the
last
detail.
detail.
It's what we call our trivia section.
Hit me up.
Okay. Did you know that... Well, just an interesting fact to start out with. Francis Ford Coppola made The Godfather when he was just 31 years old.
31.
Which blows my mind. He's younger than I am now. Oh, it's scary. And he made such a masterpiece. That's crazy. Kubrick called The Godfather the greatest movie ever created.
Is that a ringing endorsement?
Oh my gosh.
Stanley Kubrick says it's the Boy,
Yeah.
wow.
What's your trivia?
You could do worse. I'll hit you up with one here. Is let's see. While making The Outsiders. Okay, this is sort of a tangent from Coppola, but while making The Outsiders, young Tom Cruise got the screenplay for a movie called Risky Business.
Yeah.
And he was talking to his co-star Diane Lane, saying, "You should play Lana."
Oh.
And Diane Lane said, "Yeah, I don't think my dad would let me play
A hooker." That is so funny. Well, did you know that Sofia Coppola appeared in all 3 of the Godfather films? In part 1, she was Connie's child being baptized.
Oh.
In part 2, she was the immigrant child. And part 3, of course, she starred in the film.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, did you know that John Cazale played Fredo Corleone?
Yeah.
And he was also in The Conversation.
Yep.
Okay, he made 5 movies in his lifetime, and they were all nominated for Best Picture.
What?
The Godfather, Godfather 2, The Conversation, The Deer Hunter, and Dog Day Afternoon.
Wow, what an actor.
And while making The Deer Hunter, he met his romantic companion for a long, long time, Meryl Streep. So what a life. And there's actually a documentary called I Know It Was You, which is about John Cazale's amazing life. Highly recommend it to our friends in Schmoville.
Well, yeah, he's someone that you don't know too much about, but
Right.
he's someone that people should know about because he was
Absolutely.
such a brilliant actor.
Hit me up again.
Oh, that was it. That was all the details I have for you. Do you
Can I
have
give
one
you
more?
one more? I
Okay.
got one more for you.
Alright.
Did you know, Alicia,
Yes.
that for his cameo at the end of The Godfather Part 2, which the dinner scene at the very end,
James Caan?
I thought that was a flashback that was taken from The Godfather that was never used, but it
Yeah.
was shot specifically for The Godfather Part 2. So James Caan got paid as much for that one cameo as he did for the entire Godfather Part 1.
Wow.
Nice payday, James Caan.
Good negotiations
Good
there.
negotiation fees there, my friend.
Now we're up to Fast Five number 4, which is
He'd kill us if he got the chance.
The Conversation.
Amazing film. Came out April 7th, 1974, which means it is now the 40th anniversary of The Conversation and of The Godfather Part 2 because amazingly, both of those films came out the same year. They were both nominated for Best Picture.
That's incredible.
What a zone Coppola was in at that time.
I know. I can't even imagine doing 2 films in one year, let alone 2 classic films in one year. I have to say, when I was doing my research, which is watching all these movies again, I had such a great time watching The Conversation.
Yep.
Every single time I see it, it sucks me in. It's this slow burn conspiracy thriller. Interesting that it was written before and produced during the Watergate era when people were very hyper concerned about surveillance. But it was written before then.
Right.
It's amazing.
It was right on the money. And
right on the money.
I'm with you. Like, of course, we love going back and rewatching these movies again. I mean, what a great fringe benefit
Yeah, what a
of
great
doing
job.
profiles
Yeah.
is going back and rediscovering, but also from this perspective. And even though I love all the other films we're going to be talking about, I have to say that I got more out of The Conversation than I did out of the other films. This is a paranoid thriller in the extreme, like you pointed out, perfect for the Watergate era.
Yeah.
And among all of the films that Francis Ford Coppola directed, I've read that this was his personal favorite.
Well, it's one that every time you watch it, you get something more out of it. And just the layers, the details in this movie, how the dialogue of the actual conversation that Harry Cole is listening to, that changes the emphasis on the words. The words stay the same, but the emphasis is different. So that grab you just heard, it starts out with he'd kill us if he gets the chance, and then it's he'd kill us if he gets the chance. Subtle, but really important, because slowly when you're watching this movie, the meaning of those words
Changes.
becomes clear, changes.
Yes.
It's 2 ways of seeing the same thing.
And it's a challenging film because if you stay on top of it, it's a very intensely paced film. But this cost $1.6 million to make. Of course, it's back in the early 70s. It made 3 times that. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it was. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Sound, and Best Original Screenplay, which Francis Ford Coppola wrote. And it was one of the 2 films of the 70s that Coppola directed that won the top prize, the Palme d'Or, at the Cannes Film Festival. And now that I think about it, Alicia, I am not one who thinks that these great classic movies we talked about doing profiles should ever be remade.
No.
But this is one where I thought, because this is a movie about privacy, that because of today with the internet and surveillance,
And the different technologies.
and like the Patriot Act, all of these things, I feel like of any film, classic film from the 70s that really should be remade, the
Yeah, or
conversation would
maybe
be good.
just something similar to
Right.
it, the same themes. I don't want to see this remade. Gene Hackman is
Gene Hackman
so
is
brilliant
fantastic.
as Harry Cole. Just that lonely, paranoid guy. I can't imagine anyone else playing that role. Apparently, he was very different in real life.
Right.
In real life, he was very outgoing, but he had to play this very socially awkward character. He learnt saxophone for this movie.
He learned saxophone for this movie. I have that written down on my note card too.
Of course, because we're the same
Of course,
person.
same wavelength here.
Yes.
But yes, Harry Cole wound up pretty tight, isn't he? And he's a very
Yeah.
religious guy. Do not swear or use the Lord's name in vain in front of him. You'll
Mm-hmm.
never hear the end of it. He plays a professional eavesdropper. This is a brilliant, chilling, haunting film.
Mm-hmm.
And amazingly, after the film came out and became a hit, it was later that Coppola found out that the cutting edge, and I say that very loosely because now it looks very dated,
Yep.
but the technology, the surveillance equipment that they used in the conversation, they learned was the same type of equipment that the Nixon administration used to spy on Nixon's opponents
Wow.
pre-Watergate.
So he was right on the money with this
Right
movie.
on the money.
And that final scene, can we talk about it?
Yes, let's.
Where do you think the bug was?
Well, I like the theory, and I've gone with the theory that it's in the saxophone.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, the saxophone seems like the only choice because he obviously ripped apart his entire apartment, so it wasn't there. But I was thinking maybe it had something to do with the phone technology that they showed earlier on in the film, in the convention, how you blow the harmonica into it and then it becomes a recorder and you can listen in. So I thought maybe that, because his phone rings once and no one's there and then it rings again.
Right.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
I just love this movie.
Well, let's see what our profilers from Schmoville had to say.
Yeah, and
our
our
good
friend.
friend, Miri Jadakin. We
Yay,
love Miri.
Miri
Miri's
the
the best.
Jedi.
Miri the Jedi. Follow her at Miri the Jedi. She's the best. She says, the conversation is masterful proof that you don't need big set pieces or action sequences to build tension or
Yeah.
engage the audience. Hackman at his best. You go, Miri. We love you.
That's so true, because
Yes.
there is so much tension in there and not a lot of action. And a lot of times you're just listening to the same thing that's already happened. It's seemingly boring conversation, but it is just so much. in
Wait. One more scene we got to talk about before you read your schmo.
it. Okay.
The scene in the motel.
Oh, yeah.
When he's looking around, he's
Yep.
snooping around, he's under the toilet listening.
Listens in,
and then he
hears
goes on the
things,
balcony.
sees the murder.
He sees what he thinks is one murder.
Yep.
Realizes later was another.
I love that twist.
Oh,
I'm
what a
jealous
twist.
of anyone who hasn't seen this movie.
Yeah.
Just to experience the twist for
the
the
first
first time.
time.
Well, Jennifer McCarthy says the conversation questioned spying ethics through gripping filmmaking long before the NSA was a household term, and done so well that Hackman's character was essentially brought back to life for Enemy of the State. That's true. Maybe he'll pop up again this decade for another film, because in Enemy of the State, I think they used some older pictures or some younger pictures of Gene Hackman, and it's from the conversation.
Right. So actually, yeah,
Kind of
you
a
could,
spiritual sequel.
a spiritual sequel of sorts, not a remake.
Yeah,
but
not
a
a
spiritual
remake.
sequel. Thank you, Niffer. We appreciate that, and welcome to Schmoville. That
Well,
brings us to
The big picture.
the big picture, the best movie posters for
Yes.
Francis Ford Coppola's movies. Let's hear it, Pit Boss.
Less is more, a lot more, when it comes to this one sheet for the film that started it all, 1972's The Godfather. This minimal black and white image shows the logo being controlled by a hand holding puppet strings, which represents the mafia being in control and pulling the strings on society. Referred to as the father of the modern movie poster, Bob Peake, who also designed the one-sheets for Superman and Star Trek the Motion Picture, created this stylish one-sheet for 1979's Apocalypse Now, which perfectly matched the surreal tone set by the greatest movie ever made about the war in Vietnam. And just because, who can resist this one sheet for 1983's The Outsiders, which showed baby-faced up-and-comers Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Ralph Macchio, and on the far right, Tom Cruise.
Oh, look at Tom Cruise.
So cute, so
So
little.
cute. I love he's doing the backflips.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty good at that.
He is. And Emilio does it too. Emilio's good at that.
Well, usually we do a segment called The Player.
Yes.
Where we talk about the best characters in these movies. But we just adjusted it with Coppola because what a family of very, very, very talented filmmakers. So we decided to call our segment this week, The Descendants.
Yeah, because for a guy who likes to make movies about families, he has an incredible family of his own. So let's start with his father, Carmine Coppola.
Carmine Coppola composed the scores for all three Godfather films, Apocalypse Now, The Outsiders, as well as movies that Francis Ford Coppola, produced, like The Black Stallion.
Then you've got Francis Ford's sister, Talia Rose Coppola, or Shia, she later became known. She was in The Godfather, of course, as Connie Corleone, and also in Rocky as Adrienne!
Yes! Well, those are two pretty cool roles.
I feel sorry for everyone listening to that with headphones. Ow!
Well, we also have his daughter, Sofia Coppola, who is an incredible filmmaker. I think one of the best filmmakers out there, period.
And she has her own thing going.
She really does. Look at her films. You got The Virgin Suicides, Marie Antoinette, Somewhere, The Bling Ring, which was a very, very good movie, and one of my favorite movies of the O's,
Lost in Translation. Such a great film.
She's got her own voice, and what I love about her movies is the way she establishes mood and atmosphere.
And great soundtracks.
Great
soundtracks. Then you've got the son, Roman Coppola, who directed a lot of music videos, and he's obviously a great writer. He's worked with Wes Anderson, Moonrise Kingdom, Darjeeling Limited, and directed some films too.
He directed CQ, an underrated little scene movie which came out back in 2001, and also A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charlie Swan III, starring Charlie Sheen. That was an interesting movie, but CQ, because you like movies, because you love movies, I would actually recommend going back and watching CQ. I think you dig it.
Okay, I really want to see that one.
Nicolas Cage, well, we all know.
He's the nephew. He's obviously an Oscar winner for Leaving Las Vegas. A great actor. I'm sure we'll be doing a profiles on him soon.
For
His
sure.
father was August Coppola, who's Francis's brother.
And then you have his other nephew, Jason Schwartzman.
Amazing.
What a family!
It's crazy.
Good gosh.
Amongst them all, they've got 8 Oscars and 24 Oscar nominations.
That could just be like a party room.
Yeah.
Like, look at all our Oscars.
It's amazing.
Amazing. But yeah, Jason Schwartzman, major mainstay for Wes Anderson's movies like Rushmore, The Darjeeling Limited.
Yep.
Currently, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
His
He's also in
mother is
Saving Mr.
Talia.
Banks. The mother is Talia Shire.
And then a new one that just burst onto the scene, Gia Coppola, who's the granddaughter of Francis Ford. She is a filmmaker in her own right. She's did a lot of great short films in the fashion world. She has fantastic style and just did her first feature film, Palo Alto, which was based on a book of short stories from James Franco.
So when we do profiles
Talented
again
people.
in 25 years on Francis Ford
There'll be
Coppola,
more.
the whole show will just be called The Descendants.
What a family. Talent runs in that family.
And talent runs in you, Alicia Malone,
stop.
because I know that you know your Coppola.
Yeah.
As we are going to find out right now in Quiz Show.
Quiz show.
Okay, I'm going to hit you up first.
Okay,
you ready?
do it. Yep.
Okay. Which Paul Newman film was playing at the movie theater in the beginning of The Outsiders?
Okay.
Was it HUD, Hombre, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, or The Hustler?
The Hustler.
You're so good at this.
I remember that
You're
one.
so good at
Yay.
this. Nice job.
Okay,
nice
my
job.
one is, so Coppola asked for 6 months to write the script for The Godfather Part 3 with Mario Puzo. Instead, Paramount gave him, was it A, 3 months, B, 6 weeks, or C, 1 month? It's kind of a guessing one, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go with what was the middle one there?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yes.
Really?
Correct.
That was a guess.
He wanted 6 months, he only got 6 weeks.
I'm not gonna say that. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah,
but
totally.
it was a good guess. And that
All
brings
right.
us to number 3
In
in
our
our
Fast
Fast
Five.
Five. Which is
Hold on,
not
GTA is
not
gonna do
Jeopardy. Yes, Francis Ford Coppola directed Jeopardy.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
That's more like it.
Napalm in the morning.
Apocalypse Now came out August 15th, 1979. I know this is number 3 on our Fast Five, but truth be told, Alicia, Apocalypse Now is my personal favorite Francis Ford Coppola movie and one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
It's not just a great war film, it is a great film.
Period.
We were talking about this, how we could actually do an entire profiles, an entire hour on Apocalypse Now
And
because
we will.
there's so much in this movie. Yeah, why not? There's
Why
so
not?
much. This could be a little taster.
Yes, this would be like a little tease.
Exactly, because there's so much. It's so beautiful to watch. It's really surreal, like a dream or a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it shows just the confusion, the madness, the moral dilemmas, and the horror of the Vietnam War.
Well, this came out in 1979, the second of the two films that Francis Ford Coppola won the top prize at the Cannes Film
Amazing.
Festival for, which was shared with the Tim Drum, but who cares? He still won the top prize again, based on Heart of Darkness, the classic novel written by Joseph Conrad, was nominated for 8 Academy Awards. It won 2 very well-deserved Oscars for cinematography and sound, but lost Best Picture to Kramer versus Kramer.
Oh, right.
Now, if you had the chance of watching either Apocalypse Now or Kramer versus Kramer,
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
Puzzles out straight away. Well, it's amazing that everything that could go wrong on this film did.
And then some.
And then some. The budget was supposed to be about 12 to 13 million, ended up about 31 million, which these days equates to 101 million in 2014 money, just to give you an idea. There were delays, there were catastrophes, a typhoon destroyed the set, Martin Sheen had a heart attack. Brando, as you mentioned before, turned up quite overweight and very unprepared. At one point, they put an earpiece in him so that Francis Ford could feed him the lines that he was supposed to know already. It's just amazing that this film got made in the first place and that it ended up being one of the best films ever made.
Yeah, it really is one of the best films ever made. Originally, George Lucas was going to direct this, but he got sidetracked with a little film called Star Wars. Nothing but Star Wars. But yes, the troubled production of this film, if you've never seen the documentary Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's Apocalypse, it's all there. And to watch Apocalypse Now and then Heart of Darkness back to back.
How did this work?
How did this movie get finished?
I love how this movie begins with the end from The Doors.
The Doors.
And that huge explosion, which at the time was the biggest explosion on film ever.
And there's so much great dialogue in this movie. I love the one line that this guy spoke in this movie, and he goes, "Terminate with extreme prejudice." And there's so many other great lines like, "Never get off the boat. I didn't graduate the 8th grade for this. Never get off the boat." Oh.
It's got action elements. It's got horror elements. It's got adventure elements, almost like a quest. As the boat goes up the river, it goes into the darkness of Willard's mind. It's a journey for him to kind of figure out his place in the war and whether he's like Kurtz at all. I was reading that someone read into this movie and said that Captain Willard is like the ego. Colonel Kurtz is like the super ego because he's the godlike leader, and then Colonel Kilgore is the id. I love Kilgore. He is crazy. He just wants to surf.
He just wants to surf
so
and barbecue and drink
Robert
beer.
Duvall, what a character that was.
11 minutes of screen time, and Colonel Kilgore is one of the best movie characters ever.
Yeah.
But, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. But when you talked about how when the boat is going up the river, you're getting further and further into Willard's mind, to Martin Sheen's mind. But you also notice that they're going further and further back in time because the humanity and even some of the people on the boat, specifically Lance, they become more savage.
Yeah, he paints his face.
He's lost. I mean, he's a lost
letting the purple
soul.
stuff go.
He becomes savage. And I think you see more of that gradual descent and time rewinding in the 2001 sort of a reboot or remake or extended version of Apocalypse Now, Apocalypse Now Redo. Which do you like better, the original version or redo?
No, I like the redo version because there's so much more in there. And I don't know what to say. There's so much in there, and stuff like we were talking off camera about the plantation scene. Yes. Which does feel like you're going back in time with that one.
Right. Well, the way that scene sort of unfolds in Redo, they get to the location, and it looks completely deserted, like there hasn't been anyone there in many, many years, decades.
Fog.
And there's all this fog. They get off the boat, they start hearing these voices, and then the fog is blown away, and you see them, they're all standing there with their guns pointed. It's like they're ghosts, and the French plantation is like, it's like the Flying Dutchman.
It feels like a dream, that whole sequence.
It does. It's like the Flying Dutchman.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Playboy scene.
The Playboy scene is totally bizarre.
Different dream, yeah.
Totally bizarre.
Totally bizarre.
Like, what is it that Queen says? This is a bizarre scene bizarre scene in the middle of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he says something else.
It
but,
really is like that.
We're a PG show.
Well, Schmoville love Apocalypse Now as much as we do. Rod Winch says, Apocalypse Now is/was so raw an endeavour. The title denotes much of the film's story as well as the process of its making. Coppola turned out pages the night before they were shot, actors with their demands and idiosyncrasies and dysfunctions, a great DP, foreign government involvement, a studio losing control to the auteur. This was spontaneous, synchronistic art that was a touch out of control, which made it onto film. Simply a masterpiece with no real master.
Wow.
And an artistic coincidence driven by fear and passion. Well, you definitely feel the energy, the crazy energy in this movie. It's captured so well, and what a perfect movie and a perfect location to capture this magic or this madness. I was reading a quote from Coppola where he said it became like Vietnam because they had so much money, they were out of control, and they all started getting a little crazy, a little mad themselves as the production went on.
It's almost like Coppola became Kurtz.
Yeah.
He Kurtzed.
He Kurtzed
He
out.
got off the boat.
Love that.
But one thing I was found interesting in the way Coppola's process is the way he uses one word to capture the tone that he's going for in these films. So for The Godfather, the one word theme that he had in mind was succession. In The Conversation, the one word theme he had in his mind was privacy. And for Apocalypse Now, the one word theme he had was morality.
Wow.
And just before we veer off of Apocalypse Now, I just wanted to point out another scene that when I was rewatching the film, I found really, really chilling. So he's going up the river and he gets more mail and more of the dossiers from his bosses. And he finds out that there was, in fact, a captain, a soldier sent ahead of him to carry out the same mission that he was now doing.
Yeah.
Scott Glenn, character's name is Colby, and now everyone feared that he was on Kurtz's side. So they get to the compound at the end, and they get off the boat, literally get off the boat. Martin Sheen Willard is looking around, and he sees Colby, Scott Glenn, just standing there. He's not saying a word, but his face is all painted. He's completely savage. He's got this manic look in his eye, and as Willard is inching his way to Scott Glenn, he says, Colby. And he's looking at him thinking, that could be me.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
It is really chilling. And then the way the film ends, it does end with a little bit of hope because you think Willard is going to go that way.
Right, he's going to be
Kurtz.
Kurtz.
And then he doesn't.
Well, right, you think that he's going to be the next Kurtz. But he leaves, and I like he circles back and he grabs Lance's arm.
Yeah.
And he takes him back on the boat.
Lance.
But, these movies, when we talk about Coppola, there are obviously films that are definitely the mainstays of the all-time classics, not just for him, but for movies, period.
Yes.
But there are a lot of other really, really good Francis Ford Coppola films. What are some of the other ones that you liked?
Well, just quickly, I really liked Jack. I liked Jack with Robin Williams. I did. And also The Rainmaker with Danny DeVito and Matt
Rainmaker
Damon.
was good.
It's good.
Yeah, and you know what? Josh Willingham, who is our friend in Schmoville,
Yay.
awesome profiler.
Yep.
He runs our Profiles SK tweet. So
Yeah.
make sure you follow. Okay, and while we're on the subject right now, we're just going to take a break here and just mention how much we love all the profilers of Schmoville.
Definitely.
How much we appreciate how they have just become so part of this show, just like me and Alicia,
Yeah.
where they do these brackets and they really, really get into rating, picking their favorite characters, their favorite scenes, and that they chime in on their favorite movies. And we really, really cannot stress how important it is for everyone to go to iTunes and subscribe and rate and review us on iTunes.
Yeah,
because
check that you have subscribed because
Yes.
sometimes it says that you haven't. So
So
resubscribe.
resubscribe if you have not subscribed. Rate and review me and Alicia because we need these ratings and reviews to survive so we can come back and do profiles every week and make Profiles a bigger and better show.
Yes.
But on that note, why don't we get into Bracket Land?
Well, yes. So were you going to read out to Joshua Willingham's
Well, Josh
comment?
Willingham, before we do that, I just want to read out to Joshua Willingham and say,
Yeah.
he says this of Jack, although it's not perfect by any means, it's one of the first movies I ever saw as a kid that made me feel emotion for a character on screen. Robin Williams definitely makes the film seem better than it is by showing off his comedic timing as well as his heart. I was 6 years old when it came out, and it still holds a special place in my heart.
Well, Cathal Thomas Coleman likes Rumblefish, and he says that I like Mickey Rourke in it, plus the black and white images with splashes of colour. And David Badgeroff likes The Godfather Part 2. He said
Part 3.
Oh, Part 3, sorry. An extra digit there. I find people write this one off when discussing The Godfather. Part 1 and 2 are great. I think Part 3 isn't far behind.
I agree with David.
Underrated.
I think it's an underrated movie. I do enjoy Godfather Part 3 for what it is.
Yeah, it just gets compared.
And it just, of course it does. But I also really liked Peggy Sue Got Married.
Yeah.
I thought that Kathleen Turner was great in that film. Nicolas Cage was fantastic. I just like the chance to go back and change. Would you change anything? Another very, very underrated film is Tucker, the Man in His Dream. Came out in 1988. Searing, superb performance from Jeff Bridges, and also from Martin Landau, who got nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And what do you think about Dracula?
I really like it.
It's entertaining.
Yeah, I like it.
It gets a bad rap. I'm down for Dracula.
I like
a
it a
decent
lot.
film.
Now, you mentioned the brackets. So if you go to our Facebook page, which is Profiles with Malone and Mantz on the Schmoes Know Network, long title, but worth your time, give it a like, because what happens there is that they have all these great brackets, these great schmodowns between characters. So this time it was a favourite Francis Ford Coppola character. So it went from... there was several rounds, but this is the semi-finals. Michael Corleone versus Vito Corleone, and then Tom Hagen versus Sonny Corleone. It came down to Michael versus Tom Hagen. Michael Corleone is the winner.
Michael Corleone over Vito.
The most interesting character, according to Schmoville, our
Very
friends.
interesting.
And thank you so much to Leanne Lecoutier, who ran the brackets.
Yay, Leanne, you rock. Say hello to our friend Leanne in Jersey, Atlantic
Yay.
City. We love you, Leanne.
And for everyone who participated in that competition.
Yes.
So I love reading all the comments.
It's so much fun to go to our Facebook page, Profiles with Malone and Mantz on the Schmoes Know Network. Second shameless plug for our Facebook page. If you are watching the show, if you are listening to it on iTunes, please do go to Facebook, put in Profiles with Malone and Mantz on the Schmoes Know Network. Give it a like. Make sure you keep following us, checking back in, and even more importantly, sharing it with all of your friends on Facebook. Make sure you share our YouTube and subscribe to YouTube. Which is youtube.com/schmoesknowpodcast. And then, of course, go to iTunes and subscribe. Even if you think you've already subscribed, you might not be subscribed anymore. So go back and resubscribe, rate, and review us. And now let's get back into our Fast Five.
We're waiting for a very, very special guest to call in. But until then, let's go to Fast Five number 2, which is...
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. You broke my heart.
That second "you broke my heart" is killer.
The Godfather
He's like
Part
shaking
2.
his head. Oh my God.
Intense scene.
So intense. One of many intense scenes in this 3-hour plus movie that came out on December 20th, 1974. Another movie celebrating its 40th anniversary was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. It won 6. And joining us right now, we here at Profiles are very, very honored and proud and excited to be joined by Oscar winner himself, Francis Ford Coppola. Mr. Coppola, you are on with Scott and Alicia.
Hello.
Hello, Scott. Hello, Alicia. Yes, I'm here.
Hi. You said
Thank
my
you
name.
so
I'm
much.
excited.
Yeah, we're very excited. We are just having the best time celebrating your extraordinary career. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. And this year marks the 40th anniversary of both The Conversation and The Godfather Part 2. And before we get into those films, they would not have really have happened without the first Godfather, which I read that you originally passed on directing. So why did you pass, and what helped you change your mind to bring it back to it?
Well, at the time, and really my whole life, what I really wanted to do was to be a filmmaker who wrote and directed more personal, independent style films. And at that time, when they showed me The Godfather, it was, of course, a a popular best-selling book. And anyone who's actually read the book knows that the part that made up the film, which was the story of Don Corleone and his sons, was just a section of the book. The book had lots of other parts, some of them a little steamy, and when I first read it, I thought sort of like almost a potboiler, a book that was trying to sell on the base of very salacious story but the part of the Don and his sons was interesting, but I felt as a whole the book wasn't the kind of thing I wanted to do. And actually it was George Lucas, who was my young associate at the time, who said, Francis, you got to do this. This is a real job, and we need the money. So, please try to change your mind.
We are so glad that you did The Godfather, one of the greatest films ever made. I know originally it was set in the 70s, so why did you want to set it in the period time of the 40s?
40s.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't set. In the book and in the story, it was set in the 40s,
right.
But this was the 70s when it was made, and the studio wanted to make it as a pretty low-budget film, which is how I got the part. And they wanted to shoot it, not in New York, where the story really took place, but in Kansas City, and just shoot it in contemporary time. So that would mean that all the clothes and the cars would all be of the 70s, which would be the period of the shooting, so it would be cheap because you could just drive cars and it wouldn't have to be special period cars.
Right.
And I felt that the story, once I realized the story was of the father and his three sons, would be better in its original setting, which was New York right after the war in the 40s, and that's the way I tried to do it, and that's the way eventually I won out and did do it.
Well, why was Paramount originally opposed to the casting of Marlon Brando as Vito Corleone and Al Pacino as Michael, and how did you win them over? And I understand that you actually had to do sort of a fake screen test with Brando to convince the studio that he was right for the part of Vito.
Well, their disagreement with the casting was, of course, very different. Marlon Brando, who was very famous, had appeared in a number of movies just around that time, one in particular called Burn. Quemada was its foreign name, which didn't make any money, and he had made a few films that didn't have a big box office, and so they were convinced that to have Brando in the film would actually keep people away.
Oh, wow.
Also, he had a reputation for being troublesome and kind of having antics on the set that would cause delays and trouble, so they really wanted to avoid him. But Pacino, the reason was different. It was because he was so unknown. He was young. He had never been in a film. He had been in some theater. And he was, he wasn't a recognizable star. They would prefer someone like Ryan O'Neal or who had been the big hit in Love Story, which they made, or even another well-known Robert Redford or someone. And it's just that I felt that when I read the book, I saw Pacino's face because I knew him. And it was hard for me to get that image out of my mind.
It's hard to imagine anyone else playing that role. When it came to making The Godfather Part 2, did the studio leave you alone?
Yes, they did. Thanks to them, and then the success of the first one, I had a free hand with it. It was good because that was a very complicated movie that had locations in Lake Tahoe in California, in Los Angeles, in Las Vegas, in the Dominican Republic, in New York, and in Sicily. So it was a big, complicated production, and it went very smoothly.
Oh, wow. Well, The Godfather Part 2 is it's such a bold, ambitious, complex movie. It's epic with a capital E. And to know that this movie came out the same year as The Conversation, 1974, and Conversation won the top prize in Cannes, and then Godfather Part 2, you win 3 Oscars for that film. I mean, what was it like being Francis Ford Coppola during that year? I mean, that must have given you just so much confidence and vindication for everything that you fought so hard to do.
Well, it was, I think people don't understand that creative people have a lot of self-doubt and a lot of trepidation, and they may act very assertive, but in fact, alone looking in the mirror, they're as terrified as anyone who would go on a big enterprise. To be a creative person means that you have to doubt yourself. And those were big, tough movies, and of course I was able to get the little personal film, The Conversation, in on the ride. So and then, but I may have felt confident, but then when I went to want to make Apocalypse Now, nobody wanted to make it, and I found myself right back in the same place I had been. That despite having made the first Godfather, The Conversation, and the second Godfather in a row over a few-year period, that nobody wanted to help me and finance, and ultimately, I ended up financing Apocalypse Now myself, which meant not that I had any money, which meant I went on in debt to do it at a time when interest, by the way, was 19%. So it was a pretty scary. But yes, it's true that in those days I made Godfather, Conversation, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now, one after the other. Each one a super difficult production, and in fact, I never even thought I was going to survive that last film, but as things turned out, I did.
Yeah.
Wow. And each of those films are so different from each other. We have so much fun. We rewatched all those movies in preparation for this. The Conversation, I had so much fun watching again, even though I've seen it about 10 times. And I was reading that is actually your favorite film of what you directed. Is that right?
Well, it's yes, because it was smaller, it was more personal, it was more intimate, and I got to write the story and the script. That was my dream as a kid. I wanted to write the story and the script and make a personal film, because at that time we were seeing those films coming from France and Italy and Japan, and they were very inspiring. These European movies, which were more called auteur films. They were made by a person who's just not a director hired, but someone who was really an author and who in some way had a personal connection with the film.
Well, you originally wanted Marlon Brando to play Harry Caul, and then Gene Hackman really knocked it out of the park and was really perfect. At what point during rehearsal or during the actual making of the film did you realize, wow, yeah, Gene Hackman really is the man. He is a great Harry Caul?
Well, I knew he was wonderful in Bonnie and Clyde, and I was a great admirer of him, and he was the right age, and he was a good friend of Bobby Duvall, who was another great actor, and a good friend of and even a roommate of Gene Hackman for a while, and so the working with Gene, the rehearsal. I mean, he's an extremely intelligent guy, and it was a tough role because, Harry Caul is not a particularly attractive figure. He's a complicated, brooding figure, and it was tough for Gene to have to get, it's hard for an actor to play a role of a man who is so brooding and self-loathing and introspective. So it was really, I must say, I mean, you work on these things, but you don't even dare to hope that they're going to be good. You just want to survive the period and get it on film. And it was when we first sat down and looked at the movie all cut together that I realized that we had something that was compelling.
Well, speaking of surviving a movie, Apocalypse Now, I'm not sure how you survived that shoot. At what point during the editing process did you realize that you got the film that you wanted to make?
It never happens like that. You're scared and worried, right? We showed Apocalypse to a group of, I think they were Japanese distributors, and they had put up money thinking we were going to make like a World War II war film, like the Guns of Navarone or something. And when they saw such a strange, long movie, they were shocked. And I thought, oh my God, this is curtains. And we all in there. And in fact, we went that night and we cut out 20 minutes to at least make it shorter. And, even the opening of Apocalypse was very controversial, and as you know, it was nominated, but the big picture of the year turned out to be a film called Kramer versus Kramer, and Apocalypse was sort of, it was in another world of, yes, it's interesting, but what is it and stuff. But over the years, Apocalypse really emerged as a classic. And that's why many years later I decided to put the 20 minutes that I had cut out during the Japanese distributor screening back in. So there is a version called Apocalypse Redux, which is the version as it was before that fateful screening.
I want to ask you about Apocalypse Now Redux. When I saw that movie in August of 2001, Now, I have to say, Apocalypse Now is a movie I've seen so many times I've lost count. And whenever, Mr. Coppola, it is playing on the big screen here in Los Angeles, I will drop what I am doing to go see it, because that is a movie that deserves to be seen in its original form on the big screen. And when I was watching the Redux and seeing the French plantation scene for the first time, I felt like that gave the film, as if, not that it needed it, but it gave it so much more political depth. And I often wondered why that was left out of the 1979 release.
Well, it was literally, the film was so surreal and so strange. And as I said, as we were preparing to release it, we, of course, were showing it to the distributors, who were the ones who had put up money to get it. And they just felt it was so long and strange and different than anything they had seen before. So we were very worried. And we, you know, when you are worried and a movie is about to come out, you know that that first reaction might doom it or bless it. And we didn't want it to be doomed. And so we pulled out 20 minutes, and we thought, well, maybe taking the French plantation out would sort of simplify what was already a long and complex film. And I didn't want to, but when it did come out, it was you know, kind of damned by many critics, and ultimately the public kept going back, and the film survived and emerged as what it is now, which is considered something of a classic. But it didn't seem that way in the first 6 months.
Yeah, definitely a classic, and one you have to revisit over and over again. I love watching that film too.
I love watching it too, yes.
It's so incredible. Now on to the Godfather saga. How close did you come to making Godfather Part 4, and was there any idea for a story for that?
Well, you know, Mario Puzo, who is an absolutely wonderful man, was ill, and he very much wanted to be able to leave his children some inheritance beyond what he had, and so he wanted to write a Godfather Part 4, I guess, a script. And I went to Paramount and I said, look, if you give Mario the money to do this, I will help and work with him even for free. And we have cooked up an idea for a story, and we're happy to do it. But at that time, the studio had changed its management, and they didn't want to. And then, unfortunately, right in the midst of, a year later, he did pass away. So we would have had a script. And I myself, by then, felt at my age now, I ought to get back to doing what I really want to do, which is not big, Hollywood films, but more personal, experimental, interesting, new forms of what movies could be. And so that's what I'm thinking about these days.
Well, Mr. Coppola, we are honored and grateful.
Yes.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with Alicia and me on Profiles. I mean, this is a true celebration of your work and of your career.
Just a dream come true to talk to you.
Really, really is.
Where are you? I don't know where you are. I'm talking to you, but you could be anywhere.
We are in LA. Don't let my accent fool you.
Yes, she's from Australia. I'm from Philadelphia, but we are both talking to you from Los Angeles.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for your enthusiasm. It does my heart good to know that all those miserable nights when I was suicidal, that ends up in a happy way like this. So thank you, and my pleasure to talk to you.
All the best
to
you, sir. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
My mind blown.
Mind is blown.
I was like tongue-tied. I was just
Give
so
it up.
excited.
Right here.
That
Nice.
is just a dream
Wow.
true to talk to him. I can't even do it properly. Okay, that's better.
Okay, much better.
Okay, I was so nervous. My palms were sweating. Even though I've spoken to him before on the red carpet, I just feel like when he's calling up for our show and to talk about his entire career, it is such a special thing. And I am just so excited. I can't wait for everyone out there to listen to this, and thank you for everyone for your support. And I'm just like to thank the Academy, and I don't know.
See this enthusiasm right here? This excitement.
Film geek.
This is a film geek.
Yeah.
And this is a film geek. And that is why
Pull it together.
This is what Profiles is all about. Just bringing you the love of movies and of great filmmakers.
And for him to say that it warms his heart to hear that we love his film so much.
I'm never going to forget this moment.
No, me neither.
Never going to forget this moment.
Never.
And neither will you. But let's get back into The Godfather Part 2, my friend.
believe we were talking about Godfather Part 2.
Yes, we were. Let's get back into it.
Continuing the saga of the
Okay.
Corleone family.
I was going to say that while most people say that The Godfather Part 1 is the best,
sweating.
I think Godfather Part 2 is a better film. And just because of what Mr. Coppola was just talking about, how it was so much more ambitious and there was so much going on, bigger scope. You've got the stuff, the two mirroring stories, the rise of Vito, played by Oscar winner Robert De Niro, and the fall, at least the corruption of the soul of Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
But then you've got like the trials, the stuff in Cuba, and there's just so much to this
prologue.
movie.
Yeah.
It's just such a bold, ambitious film.
It's both a prologue and a sequel at the same time, and I think it was really smart not to try and do the same thing as The Godfather, to make it different. And I love the intercutting between the two generations, the father and the son, and the passing of the sins from one to the other.
The sins of the father. And then interestingly, the going back and the forth in the original cut for the film, the studio felt that you didn't spend enough time in either time period long enough to absorb it and really get consumed by it before it would shift back to the other time period.
But I felt like you needed that break because it got so intense.
It did. It
and
definitely
then it
did.
took a moment to take you out of it and then back in.
So then when they recut the film, they spent longer periods of time in each time period. The movie was shot between October 1st, 1973 and June 19th, 1974. And then, of course, Coppola made his more personal film that he wrote, The Conversation. But so many great quotes in this film. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. What a great line.
That's almost the theme for the whole movie. And similar to Godfather Part 1, it's all about revenge and betrayal and violence and power and, of course, loyalty to family.
Well, speaking of family, let's just go right into it with our Fast Five. At number one is...
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Yes, there he is! The Godfather!
Part 1.
Came out in on March 24th, 1972. Nominated for 11 Academy Awards. It won 3. Best Picture, Best Actor, Marlon Brando, and Adapted Screenplay. And among the nominees that year in the category for Supporting Actor were Robert Duvall, James Caan, and Al Pacino was nominated for Supporting Actor? What?
I thought he would be lead.
That's a lead performance, my friend.
And I think he thought he would be lead too. He wasn't happy with being in the supporting actor category. The Godfather is widely considered to be one of the greatest films ever made.
Yep.
If you look at any of those top 100 movies of all time lists, they will always have The Godfather as number 1, 2, or 3. Brando, just an incredibly iconic character. I love Marlon Brando. I think he's just such a brilliant actor.
I couldn't tell.
I couldn't tell
with your
because
shirt.
I'm wearing him. And I love little moments like the very beginning of the film when Brando is stroking the cat. And that was a stray cat on the set that Brando picked up. And then the cat was so happy, it was purring. And they actually had to redo his voiceover later on because the cat was purring so loudly. I love that the actor who was playing Luca Brasi was so nervous to do his scene with Marlon Brando that he stumbles as he's speaking, kind of like I was to Francis Ford, and they kept that in and they made that part of the character, and then they added the speech that he's practicing earlier on.
Yeah. Don Corleone, I am honored that you invited me to your daughter's wedding.
Yeah.
On the day of your daughter's wedding.
But this just reinvented the gangster genre and really revitalized American cinema, because before that it was all about foreign markets.
Right.
And then America showed that they had this great style.
The Godfather, along with Love Story, which came out the year before, saved Paramount and saved Hollywood. It really, really did. The movie was shot in 62 days. The original budget was $1 million. It was actually upped to $7 million when all was said and done. So many great, iconic scenes in this movie. And to this day, watching it again, I've seen a movie like 20 or 30 times, if not more. But the scene with the studio head, when he wakes up in the bed.
With the horse's head.
With the horse's head, cartoon.
Oh.
Poor horse cartoon.
Poor
and he's like,
horse.
ah!
And then you've got the murders in the restaurant. You've got Carlo's murders. Just superb acting. It's got great character studies, beautiful cinematography. Gordon Willis, who passed away quite recently, the Prince of Shadows.
Wow.
I love the way he made it so dark and shadowy because that was the world of the Corleones. The Godfather is my favorite Coppola film. I get something new out of it every single time. And I watched it again on the plane, and again, it made the time fly by.
Well, I gotta say that this, you talked about the scene at the end of the film where that's when Michael Corleone really becomes the Godfather. But on a more symbolic note, after Michael Corleone gets punched in the face by Captain McCluskey, and his jaw is wired shut, and that they're having the discussion among the family that they have to go and kill Sollozzo and McCluskey. But there's a scene, and this is after Michael has stayed away from the family. He says, it's my family, Kay. That's not me. And Vito wanted to keep him out of the family business because he was a war hero.
He's a good boy.
So now what is that line from Godfather Part 3? I try to get out, but they keep pulling me back in. So there's that scene before Michael goes to kill Sollozzo, where he's sitting with Sonny and with Tom Hagen, and he's sitting in the chair, and you see him on a symbolic level become Michael Corleone, where he's talking about, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
He does it very calm, and the camera, this is just to sort of like accentuate the moment. The camera zooms in on him very, very, very slowly, as if to say, he's the Godfather.
Pay
now.
attention.
Pay attention to this moment.
Yeah, because I think it really happens just before that at the hospital. That's when he really changes. When the policeman punches him in the face, I think that's the moment he changes, and then you see him slowly descend into the Godfather. Of course, it's all about family loyalty once again, and vengeance, and it's quite brutal. But interesting that the violence only comes in about 45 minutes. That's
the cartoon?
That's the horse head.
Horse.
That was the first one. And I don't think it's, I mean, yes, there are some very violent scenes, like Sonny's death.
Sonny's death is horrifying.
The toll booth.
Whoa.
That's probably the most violent. And there are some other scenes, but it's not actually as violent as you might think.
But the thing about the horsehead scene is you actually don't see the violence happening.
No,
you see the aftermath, which is what makes it scarier. And our profilers in Schmoville about both Godfather films, going back to Godfather Part 2, Maxam Vincent says, The Godfather 2 is my second favorite film of all time. What's number one? It's handled so well. It's intense, rough, provocative, very tough to watch. 202 minutes of pure awesomeness.
Well, Blaine Harris says, The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 are some of the most perfect films ever made, with acting brilliance all around. It is very hard to believe that it is 40 years old. It feels as though it could have been made yesterday. It's true. Very timeless. The cinematography, soundtrack, screenplay, and it's very quotable.
Well, my good friend Liam Logrand, who was my favorite person in Schmoville because he is a huge Beatles fan just like me, has this to say about the first Godfather. It's the greatest ensemble to be assembled in cinematic history, with legends such as Brando, Pacino, Caan, and Duvall all bringing their A game to this compelling and excellently executed story. The only reason I personally prefer 1 over Part 2 is, well, you said this yourself, Alicia, is Marlon Brando's performance as Don Vito Corleone.
Yeah.
After multiple flops in the 1960s, it was great to see Brando return to what made him the greatest actor of all time.
He is. And finally, Tyler Myers says, I love The Godfather because not only was it the first Coppola film I ever saw, but it's one of the very few movies that I can label perfection. Everything from the acting, most notably from heavyweights like Brando, Pacino, Caan, Duvall, to the writing, directing, cinematography, and the music was absolutely flawless. It revolutionized the gangster genre and is filled with iconic moments, including the restaurant scene and the horse head in the bed, an absolute masterpiece from beginning to end. And I think this profiles is almost a masterpiece from beginning to end.
I was just going to say, you know what else was a masterpiece? This episode of Profiles.
So let's recap.
If there was something else that was absolutely flawless and iconic, it was this episode of Profiles.
Yes, let's recap our Fast Fives, shall we?
Number 5
The
is The Outsiders. Number 4,
The
The Conversation. Number 3,
Apocalypse
Now. Number 2,
The
Godfather Part 2. And number 1, The
Godfather.
Godfather.
And we had Francis Ford Coppola himself call in to talk to us, and he used the words Scott and Alicia, and I died inside. I think I can drop the mic. I'm happy now.
Talk about a moment we can't refuse.
Yeah.
This was great. And before we tease to next week, we want to again remind you, especially if you love this episode of Profiles, which is our best episode yet. I know we say that all the time.
Every week.
But this is the one.
Yeah.
This is our masterpiece. This is our Godfather, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now, and Conversation all wrapped up into one. Please, please, please Please share our Facebook fan
Yes.
page, Profiles with Malone and Mantz on the Schmoes Know Network. Share it with your friends.
Subscribe
Join in
to
on the
iTunes.
conversation. Subscribe to
Rate and
iTunes.
review.
Rate and review Malone and Mantz
Yeah.
on iTunes.
Because honestly, we put hours of work into this and we love doing it. It's our passion. We just want as many people to see it as possible. And
We
we want to
really
keep
do.
getting these great guests, although I don't know how we're going to top this one.
How do we top this? I don't know.
I don't know.
But for next week, who could
do
be
we
next week's
have?
Profiles? Alfred Hitchcock!
My favorite director of all time, perfectly timed for Halloween.
Halloween, because that's what he would have wanted.
It's the master of suspense. It's exactly what he would want.
So please check us out next time on Profiles. Until then, good evening.
From producers Christian Harloff, Mark Ellis, and the entire Schmoes Know Network crew, we would like to thank you for listening to Profiles with Alicia Malone and Scott Mantz. Special thanks to Kevin Undergaro and Maria Menounos, the author of Every Girl's Guide to Diet and Fitness, in stores now. Be sure to subscribe to Profiles on iTunes and rate and review the show. To get other Schmoes Know Network episodes, movie news, and join the conversation, be sure to visit schmoesknow.com. I'm the Pit Boss, and this has been a presentation of the Schmoes Know Network.